Okay, so since we're in between topics, then I wanted to do a two side topics if we have time today. The second one I didn't list. The first one was the Rambam secretly a Kabbalist? Okay, and this is kind of, I was trying to find like an appropriate time to do this, and I figured like, oh, Adar, v'nahafachu, like reversal type thing. But let me tell you how I found it, because this is good Rambam methodology. So these are the 2 volumes of Igros HaRambam from R Sheilat. Okay, R Sheilat is one of the big Rambam scholars who's still alive. He compiled all of the different letters of the Rambam. The ones that are in Arabic, he has the original Arabic and the Hebrew translation, and then he even includes stuff from like the Geniza fragments that they found. And what I recommend that you do is, if you've never read the Rambam's letters, very worthwhile to read. Not all of them are translated into English, but you see a completely different side of the Rambam than you see in his formal writings, because he's writing to people and you see the humanity of him. And we've done a little bit. Have we done any Rambam letters this year? You know? Did we do? Oh yeah, we did for this, right, about his brother dying and stuff like that. Yeah.
It was also about the rabbi that talking to a rabbi about him charging, becoming a Rosh Hashiva.
Right, about the Rosh Hashiva. And do we do the one to Ovadia Hager this year or not? Okay, that's also a really, really good one. So sometimes what I'll do is on Shabbos, when I'm like just looking for some exploratory stuff to do, I'll just read random stuff in the Rambam's letters or tshuvos. And so that's how I found this, okay? But the place where I found this claim, okay, so the first topic we're doing is, was the Rambam secretly a Kabbalist? So have you ever heard this claim before?
I've heard it.
Yeah?
I've I haven't heard it, but I've in reading a lot of things more, I'm like, wow, that sounds so in line with a lot of.
Right. So I'll mention this because this was before I started recording. So Chizkiyahu said, I think he was an unintentional Kabbalist. Yeah. So there are people who hold that the Rambam's metaphysics is consistent with Kabbalah, with what we call Kabbalah, and that is a plausible claim. In fact, the Rambam would say that if that were true, then that would be perfect, because that's what he was trying to do, you know. But that is a different claim. There's also a wacky claim that you need the Rambam to act. You need the Abu Lafia, who, there's several Abu Lafias, but the Kabbalist one who went to try to get the Pope to convert to Judaism and made the spiral meditations. I believe he held that like you need the Rambam's Moreh and the Sefer HaYetzirah and other Kabbalistic stuff to like get to the highest levels of Kabbalah. That's like a different personal claim. But
whether you need the Moreh for Kabbalah, do you need Kabbalah to understand Moreh?
No, the other way. You need the Rambam to understand the Kabbalah. Yeah. I'm not so familiar with him, but I read about him in Shalom. So that is another claim that we won't be addressing today. And then the other thing we won't be addressing today is what the Rambam mean, like what we call something Kabbalah. What do we mean by that in the Rambam's system? That we dealt with. Do we do that this year or last? Do we do the Masa Merkava and Masa Bereshis this year? And Chagiga and like indoors, like the rules about how to pass down the Kabbalah. Is that sounding familiar?
I'm not familiar from stuff.
Okay, so we definitely did that last year. I can't remember how much we touched on it this year. So I have shiurim on that, which I can like supply you with if need be. Okay, so the place where I first discovered this claim that the Rambam was a secret Kabbalist is in the Migdal Oz. Okay, it was a commentary on the Rambam. If you want a copy, I have a copy here, but it's extremely small.
If
not, I'll just put it
about the Rambam or
commentary on the Rambam.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So Migdal Oz, and I pulled up the Wikipedia articles because I didn't know who everyone was. Okay. So just to give a little background here, Rambam, the traditional dates for his birthday is either 1135 or 1138. We don't exactly know.
Yeah.
That's machlokas. And he died in 1204. So the Migdal Oz is.
Do we have the Ibn Tibbon of Moreh?
We do, yeah.
The what?
I just want to look at it.
Hold on, is this the Migdal Oz?
But basically talks about how he has still dropped his barley code.
Migdal Oz commentary.
I thought everybody held that.
Yeah. Okay, Migdal Oz. Okay, yeah. So this is Shem Tov ibn Avraham ibn Gaon. So he was like 100 years-ish after like 80 years after the Rambam. He was born 8 years after the Rambam, but within 100 years after the Rambam. So that's who wrote this commentary. Okay, so the Migdal Oz Right. And this is not the earliest claim. This is just where I first saw it. And I think it's where a lot of people see it because it is in the Moreh Nevuchim.
If you're supposed to, should I not write anything?
Yeah, you don't need to write this one. Thank you. Okay, so he says like this. So he quotes a Ravid, which I actually could not find. I don't know why this Ravid is not appearing in Hebrew books or in Al HaTorah. The Ravid is appearing here. So I'm just going to read. Oh, no, it's too long. All right, we're not going to do the Ravid. Okay, we're just going to do the Migdal Oz. So the Migdal Oz says like this.
What is the Migdal Oz about?
It's a commentary on the Rambam.
It's all about.
Yeah, I don't even know if it's on all of the Rambam. It certainly seems to be on Sefer Hamada.
And it's a Shem Tov guy?
Yeah, Shem Tov ibn Falkera ibn Gaon. Yeah.
Okay.
So he writes like this, and this is the claim. Vani Omer, I say, Kama panim laTorah nistarim v'niglim. There are many faces of the Torah that are concealed and revealed. V'haderech asher tafas ram. I'm going to say Rambam, okay, not Ramzal because we call him the Rambam. The approach that the Rambam took was in this matter, Dome l'derech shetafas b'sefer Moreh Nevuchim, is similar to the approach he took in the Moreh Nevuchim. So this is a commentary on the Mishnah Torah, and he's saying that the approach that the Rambam took in explaining ideas about God in the Mishnah Torah is the same approach he took in the Moreh Nevuchim. Liyashev das hamisfalsef. That's one of those fun Hebrew words that clearly comes from the Greek, right? No, from philosopher. Okay, so to reconcile the opinions of the philosophers, hitzikuhu pshute hamikraos, who were bothered by the pshat of the psukim, and that's a lot of what the Moreh Nevuchim is about, right? Is that the pshat of the psukim goes against ideas about God's not incorporeality or his oneness, and the Moreh Nevuchim is explaining how to reconcile the two.
Because they're kind of like. What's the word? Like it gives them human qualities or whatever?
Yeah, anthropomorphic. Yeah, right. All right. Lakach, Hebrew Lashon Hagari, and that's why he wrote it in Arabic. Okay. I don't know why he means that's why he wrote it in Arabic. I mean, Rambam wrote everything in Arabic except for the Mishnah Torah. I don't know why
I think he's talking about like the Mutakalin or whatever, because that was like the philosopher. Like
it could be. Yeah, right. I mean, it could be. It's just a weird thing to say that he wrote it in Arabic because it was against, it was like trying to reconcile philosophy. Like he wrote the Sefer Mitzvos in Arabic. He wrote the Pirush HaMishnayos in Arabic. He wrote like many of his letters in Arabic. I'm not sure like why he's.
Maybe he's saying that Mishnah Torah was never meant to be polything. It was just.
You mean the Moreh Nevuchim?
I mean, Moreh Nevuchim.
Yeah.
For it was more just.
Never meant to be what?
Never meant for everyone. That was maybe at best meant for the.
Right. That is possible. Right.
Absolutely for the Arabic world. Where,
right.
Whereas like philosophy,
right? So that's a good way to read this, meaning that it's really more like he did not want to write it in Hebrew because then it'd be accessible to everyone. Okay, right. But he himself knew that the true path is hidden, and that it is only transmittable from mouth to mouth. Okay, meaning as an oral Torah, that's the real Kabbalah. And in literally chashai means in whispers, but it means in secrecy. And in excessive secrecy, as it is written in Chagiga. So this is what we did in our Rambam shiur on Kabbalah, where he goes through what you're allowed to pass it down and what you're not. For example, there's two main subjects of Kabbalah. Again, the Chazal never used the term Kabbalah, but they use the term Maaseh Bereshis and Maaseh Merkava, the work of creation and the work of the chariot. And with Maaseh Bereshis, you can only teach it to one student who's qualified, and all the qualifications are spelled out in the Gemara. And Maaseh Merkava is the work of the chariot, which is metaphysics, which you can only teach to one student who's qualified, but you can't even teach it to him explicitly. You have to just hint stuff at him, and he has to infer it on his own, and you can't even give it directly. And
figure it out.
He has to figure it out, yeah. And so the Rambam combined with the Gemaras and Chagiga go through the second parak, go through all those halachas. Okay. Kamosha Hodia b'Hakdamas HaMoreh, as the Rambam writes in the introduction to the Moreh. And I'll bring other proofs in the third Chelak with God's help. So he wrote a commentary. The Migdal Oz wrote a commentary on the Moreh Nevuchim. In fact, if you see one there that says Shem Tov, so I think that's him. Okay, I think that's the Shem Tov commentary. V'af shekavar him ksuvos b'asher chiburi v'seder olam b'asher ramas harav. I don't know who this Reish Aleph is. Mekubal mipel peh derech kodesh yikari l'saridim sher Hashem koreh. So he's saying this is alluded to elsewhere. Okay, now here's where he says it. Uladati. Okay, according to my opinion, Rambam Zal Yada Behem Besof Yamav. The Rambam knew about these Kabbalistic truths that are only handed down Baal Peh at the end of his life. Sha'ani made, I testify, so this is Shem Tov talking, I testify, Shira'isi Besfarad, that I saw in Spain, Eretz Moladatenu, the country of our birth, okay, because the Rambam was also born in Spain, Kasuv b'Megilat Setarim. I saw written in a scroll of parchment, Yashan, which was old, Miyushan, very old, Ushan, and smoky. Okay, I don't know what exactly means smoky, maybe smudged. Yeah, could be. Lashon Zeh. I saw this statement written. Okay, quote: Ani Moshe b'Ravi Maimon. I, the Rambam, kishiradati lechadri hamerkava, when I went into the depths of the Merkava, which is this area of metaphysics that we call Kabbalah, binosi b'inyan hakates, I contemplated the end times, v'chule, okay, etc. Okay,
and word for end times?
Kates, like Kates Hayamim. Okay, so he quotes this, he just alludes to this letter, okay, and which I'll show you in a second. Ukrovim hayu devarav ledivri hamukubalim hamitim. So this is actually like what you were saying, okay? That his words were similar to the words of the true mukubalim, the true Kabbalists. Sharamas Rabbeinu Hagadol Haramban zal, that the Ramban alluded to, and Ramban was an avowed Kabbalist, but Chilas Pirusho LaTorah, which he alludes to at the beginning of his commentary on the Torah. Okay, so this is a very small claim, but this is saying that that he basically saw a scroll written by the Rambam where he says, like, I saw these ideas at the end of my life, and it ends up being that the version of the Kabbalah that he's presenting is similar to the Ramban's. Okay, so he does not go on at length about this. However,
it came a little later, right? Ramban was a little later.
Ramban was a little later, correct? Yeah. Okay, so then he tries to bring other allusions to the fact that the Rambam did this. Gamar isi teshuva acheres mimeno. I also saw another responsa from the Rambam. Bahaya zal magid ba shehischil lefarish hagados al derech nister. That the Rambam testifies that he began to explain the midrashim in a concealed manner, kasher yiyaed mizman, as he had promised at an earlier time. So this is definitely true. The Rambam in the Pirush HaMishnayos, I think, promised to write a commentary on all midrashim to explain like the esoteric ideas. And then he says that he decided not to because it would reveal too much. Okay.
So he already had a certain claim that he did know some sort of secret knowledge.
Correct. Yeah. And that's the claim, just to, I guess, familiarize ourselves with the claim he makes in the Moreh Nevuchim. He says that he did not receive actually, yeah, you know what, let's actually read in the Moreh Nevuchim what he says now. This would be a good time to do it. So in the introduction to the third chelek of the Moreh Nevuchim, the Rambam writes like this. And this is, so the third chelek of the Moreh Nevuchim, the first 7 chapters of it are the Rambam expounding on the Masa Merkava, on the this area of metaphysics. So he says, we have stated several times that it is our primary objective in this treatise to expound as far as possible the biblical account of the creation, Masa Bereshis, and the description of the divine chariot, Masa Merkava, which the Rambam defines what the scope of those 2 topics is in his commentary on Chagiga 2.1. Okay, that's what we gave Sharon last year, in a manner adapted to the training of those for whom this work is written. And do you know who he wrote the Moreh Nevuchim for?
In theory, first it was in theory one of his students, effectively intending it would be released. So it's like he's not technically welling in this, but he's basically
okay. Yeah. So the question of how the Rambam could write this is a good question. But the person he wrote it to was Yosef ben Yehudah. Okay, who we know that because the beginning of the Moreh Nevuchim is a letter to Yosef ben Yehudah saying, "I'm writing this for you and for those like you." Right. So he knew that it would be shared with people and
sort of philosopher, people who were aware of philosophy, but they were trying to be
exactly, yeah. And he defines the nature of the troubledness at the beginning. So he wrote this for Yosef ben Yehudah. So the Rambam says here again, going back to the Rambam, we have also so in a manner adapted to the training for those whom this work is written. We have also stated that these subjects belong to the secrets of Torah. That's Sisrei HaTorah. Okay, you are well aware of how our sages blame those who reveal these secrets and praise the merits of those who keep them secret, although they are perfectly clear to the philosopher. In this sense, they explain the passage in Yeshayahu, her merchandise shall be for them that dwell before Hashem to eat sufficiently, which concludes in the original words, V'lemechase atik. L'mechase atik.
What kind of philosophers?
I assume someone who knows metaphysics.
Just like any kind of like.
I think so, but I'm not sure what he means because I don't. I mean, okay. Well, actually, we'll see in a second. Okay, just the paragraph's not very long. I.e., that these blessings are promised to him who hides things which the Eternal has revealed to him, namely secrets of the Torah. If you have understanding, you will comprehend that which our sages pointed out. They have clearly stated. This was copied from the scanned version, that the Ma'aseh Merkava includes matters too deep and too profound for the ordinary intellect. It has been shown that a person favored by providence with reason to understand these mysteries is forbidden by the Torah to teach them, except by way of oral transmission, and on the condition that the pupil possesses certain qualifications, and even then, only the heads of the sections may be communicated. That's why I was saying you could only like allude to certain parts. Now, here's the line you were looking for. This has been the cause why the knowledge of this secret knowledge has entirely disappeared from our nation, and nothing has remained of it. This was unavoidable, for the explanation of these mysteries was always communicated by way of oral transmission. It was never committed to writing.
Wait, do you have the next part of the text?
Oh, I guess I didn't include it here, but I can read it in the
confess.
Kafech.
It is very heavily relevant to a discussion.
Okay, let me look it up in the original, or in the Kafech.
So far he's kind of saying that because, spell it out, but he's saying basically, because the system of transmitting it was purely not only oral, but also because it had to be like figured out.
Extremely restricted.
Yeah, like basically you can kind of infer that every generation there was less and less people who were figuring it out.
Right.
What they were doing.
Right. And I think even the Rambam himself, if you said, hey, Rambam, do you know for sure that it's lost? Yeah. You can't know for sure, but he's saying it's like reasonable to surmise that it's been lost. Okay, so he says, I'm using the Kafech now, that Ella Zohisivish Nifsak Meda Ze Min Ha'uma Kalil. This has been the cause why this knowledge has utterly ceased from the nation, to the point where you can't find a little or a lot of it. And it is fitting for this to have happened to it, because it was only because it was only shlo nechtal. So sorry, shlo chadal lios maser. It was not ceased. It's a weird way to say it. Being transmitted from mind to mind and not written at all in a book. Okay, but then he goes into how he's allowed to write it. Is that what you want to get to?
Specifically the part where he makes very clear that at least for that, I've been on for a section of stuff he's just straight talking in code.
Yeah, right. I mean, so again, this is a whole sugya about like how the Rambam could write this part of the Moreh Nevuchim.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the part where he just openly says there's a bit where he's talking in code.
Yeah, right. That's here.
I'm saying is that
that's how he wrote it.
I'm saying any discussion with the Kabbalah will probably center around the fact that the Rambam is openly saying that he's at least for a bit writing in code.
I don't get what you're trying to say.
I was saying that the Rambam is going to openly say he's writing a code somewhere that opens the door to a ton of different things. They could be writing. They could be meaning that okay, these parts of Yechezkel, they're a Kabbalistic message. I've written them in a way where it's not obvious.
Yeah, right. That's what he says. Yeah,
and therefore,
I'm just saying is that if you're going to say he's a Kabbalist, you're going to say the parts of Yechezkel are definitely quality.
Yeah, well, of course, yeah. If you're going to say that he has these Kabbalistic ideas, then this is.
I'm saying it's also making clear that you can't just say since the Rambam didn't say something in a way where I can see it, therefore he's not saying it. Right.
Okay, so that's the Rambam Shita that the Kabbalah was lost by his time. Okay, so back to the Migdal Oz's proofs here. So he's saying the Rambam had promised to write a commentary on the hidden knowledge in the Midrashim, Kasher Yad Mizman, which he promised a while ago. And when you go over these things, when he went over these things, he saw that they were esoteric, like the beginning, lo ala biyado pirsum behem, and that I don't know why he says lo ala biyado pirsum behem, that he didn't attain a publicizing of them. Oh, this is the phrase that you were talking about. Elakamatik milashon lalashon. In other words, he can't teach them. If he tries to teach them in a way that people would understand, it would be as if he's just translating from one language into another that people don't understand. Hashem bam Sinai b'kodesh ulkach lo gamram v'ginzam. So, in other words, Migdal Oz's claim is that the Rambam therefore did not write these things, and he didn't complete them, and he hid them away.
The things that he
was going to originally write in these.
They're not explaining us how he got to that, right? He
just right.
Except that he himself said that he threw whatever being
right through his own understanding. Exactly, yeah, and then that was the part I was going to read, but I didn't realize I didn't translate it. Is that the way the Rambam says that he got this Ma'aseh Merkava is that he got it through his understanding and his own speculation, not through a Masorah, which is why he says it's not necessarily reliable. He says like I'm not claiming to have any tradition on this. This is just my conclusions that I've arrived at. All right, the Rizal min hapsukim you. Okay, so the rest of his points here are what do you call? Okay, 1 second. Shukman Tasi. Okay, yeah. So in my opinion, the rest of this part is not necessarily relevant, but the part that I was intrigued by is this thing about the finding this testimony from the Rambam that like he found this Kabbalah at the end of his life. Okay, we'll go into it if we need to. Thank you though. So, but then I found that there is this work attributed to the Rambam called the Megilat Setarim. Okay, the scroll of secrets.
How did you find that? How did you find that this stuff?
So I found it through the letters. Okay,
Oh,
but I'll tell you how. Yeah, I'll tell you how. So this version of it is found on Sefaria. Okay, that says. So it's letter ascribed to the Rambam. V'noda b'shem Megilat Setarim. It's known by the work, the scroll of secrets. Muva meharav moharam al shakar. B'hasagosav al sefer ha'imunus the Rav Shem Tov. So this is cited by this person, this person. Nope, that's the Rambam. This person, Rav Moshe al Shakar, so who was much later, 1466 to 1542, in his commentary on the Shem Tov, the Sefer HaEmunus Rav Shem Tov. Now, I don't know if that's the same Rav Shem Tov. Gam Meharav, I don't know who this person is either. So it's a long letter, which we're not going to read through. Okay, but I was like, but apparently this is the letter where he actually like writes out these Kabbalistic ideas that he claims to have, that he says he discovered. Okay, and he even writes about practical Kabbalah, about it, like how to use divine names to like work miracles and stuff. Okay, so I was like, what's the deal with this letter? Okay, and this is because I saw this listed in Megilat Setarim here. So in this volume, so there's 2 volumes. In the second volume, so he organized the letters chronologically. So then after he has the chronological letters, then he has 2 appendices. Okay, Appendix 1 is Igaros Misupakos, is dubious letters. Okay, letters that we're not sure if they're the Rambam or not. And then he has a second appendix, which is Igros Mizuyafos, is forged letters. Okay, and that's where he puts this letter. Okay,
what's the proof that's forged?
So that's what we're going to read. Okay, so here is this one I actually printed out. Okay, so it's very short. So he doesn't actually even print the letter. Okay, but so this is Rav Yitzchak Sheilat, which I guess if we're doing Wikipedia stuff, I'll just show you. So Yitzchak Sheilat is born 1946, Israeli Orthodox rabbi and scholar of Jewish thought, specializing in the writings of Maimonides and Rav Kook. So this is not a stranger to mysticism, right? He co-founded and serves as a senior faculty member at Yeshiva Birkat Moshe. That's the place that publishes the raw blogs that I like. The Hezder Yeshiva Malay Adamim. Okay, so this. Oh, really? I didn't know that. Cool. Okay, so this is what he writes. Oh, sorry, this is the wrong one. What did I call it? Hold on. That's the second topic we're doing. We are looking at Rambam Bekius, Sheilat. Okay, so he says at the bottom of the page, Dalid. Oh, no, sorry. Yeah, bottom of the page, Dalid. Megilat Setarim, Megilat Amukos, or Megalei Amukos. Okay, or is it Megilat Amukos? Megalei Amukos, revealer of depths. So B'ksav Yad Achadim Yucheses the Rambam. So it exists in some handwritten editions, and it's ascribed to the Rambam. Igeres HaMechunim Megilat Setarim, a letter that is nicknamed the Scroll of Secrets. Shlucha El HaTalmid HaChashuv Rav Yosef Rabbi Yehudah. So it was addressed to Yosef Rabbi Yehudah, who is the very same student that the Rambam wrote the Moreh Nevuchim for. Okay, so prominent guy. Okay. Ikar tochna devarim b'sheva chachmas hakabbalah. So the essential content of it is statements of praise of the wisdom of Kabbalah, v'yisrona al philosophia, and its superiority over philosophy. V'hadrachus b'inyane Kabbalah ma'asis, and guidance in matters of practical Kabbalah, v'shimush shemos kadoshim, and use of holy names. Okay, so he says, Ha'igeres nidvasa l'rishona. This letter was first published, b'sefer HaKabbali, in the Kabbalistic book, I guess it's Shushan Sodos, which if you look at footnote number 2 at the bottom of the page, Lefi hachida b'shem ha'gedolim ha'sefer chubar al-yedei Rav Moshe b'Rabbi Yaakov Mikiyov. Okay, Shechai 350 years after the Rambam. Okay, so I guess we don't know for sure who wrote this book. So that's the first time it's mentioned. But the author of that book is in doubt. So the author, so the first time this is brought down is in this book, and the author of the book who brings down the letter is in doubt about whether it's true what he saw at the end of his life, that the Rambam turned to the opinions of the Kabbalists.
That just makes you trust
of the Kabbalists.
It just makes you trust it more.
Why?
Because if the first source is going, this is definitely true, then if the person who made this up is lying, he's gonna say this is definitely true.
Yeah, but if
the person who made this up is the person who found this is telling the truth, then there's a high odds he'll say his uncertainty, and that it's that
being
person
intellectually honest. You're saying?
And that the person who's forging this, he wouldn't say, "Oh, I don't know."
Here's the thing. First of all, I haven't seen this book inside, but the thing is that I'm not sure about is he says. So he prints the letter, right? But then he says, I'm not sure if it's true what I saw written, that at the end of his life, then the Rambam turned to the opinions of the Kabbalists. I don't know if that's like referring to what Megilat Oz was referring to, that the Rambam retracted at the end of his life, or in other words, or if it's referring to the contents of this letter. I'm not sure. But also just keep in mind that if it were actually a real letter, he would also write it with certainty,
Why?
Because the letters here that he published, he writes with certainty,
I'm saying is that this could be a thing where he finds this letter and just actually doesn't know.
Yeah, well, that's what he's claiming. But you're saying that if he said it with certainty, then that would make you suspicious that he's making it up. And I'm saying, but if you print something that you know for sure is true, you also wouldn't express doubt.
Here's what I figure this: that the guy, he's digging around the Geniza, like we do, and then sees a letter, and then he's uncertain because he's just found it on his own Italian tradition of the connection, just saw Ron's name on it. I'm making a very simple point. I'm saying when you publish a book, like let's say you publish the Rav's writings, right? So if you know 100% that it's the Rav's writings, you don't say I'm in doubt about it. You publish it with certainty. So if this were a real letter, he would publish it with certainty. So I agree with what you're saying. The fact that he's in doubt about it gives him more credibility, but I'm arguing with the other statement you made, which is that if you publish it with certainty, then you would be more in doubt about it. I'm saying no. If you publish it with certainty, then you could say that he's either a bald-faced liar or he's telling the truth. I'm agreeing with half of your statement. You see what I'm saying? The distinction? Yeah, I see what you're saying. It's just for me, like the biggest thing is that gets rid of the possibility of bald-faced liar. Okay. Yeah, that's true. So that's the half that I am agreeing with, just not the other half. Okay, so now he says, Lanius daiti, according to my opinion, in afilu tsel shel safek shel afinu ziyuf magamasi. So he says, in my opinion, it's beyond a shadow of a doubt that this is an absolute forgery. Okay, so he's going to give his reasons why, and I think these are in chronological or in order of appearance, not in order of strength. Okay, because the first one is a little weak. Okay, I mean, it makes sense. He says, Mechaber Igeres Kosev, the author of this letter writes, Uvachai Ahava Hanimretes, with like living strong love, Asher Haisa Beini Levenecha, between me and you, Ubein Avosecha Hakdoshim, and between our forefathers, between our ancestors. Okay, so that's how the Rambam starts off the letter. That he's saying that I love you, and just as the love of my ancestors and your ancestors. Mechaber means a letter. An author. Yeah, so he's calling it the author of the letter because he doesn't hold us the Rambam. But in the opening letter to the Moreh, which we know was written to Yehudah ben Yosef ben Yehudah.
Okay, this is the writing of that guy.
Of R Sheilat. Yeah. Okay. So he says, but in his opening letter to the Moreh Nevuchim, which he wrote to the same, to Yosef ben Yehudah, mitueres reshis hayikaros ben Rambam and Rav Yosef. He describes the first meeting between the Rambam and Rav Yosef. The ein zecher la'ahava asher haisa beino levein avosav shel Rav Yosef, and there's no reference to the love between the Rambam and the Rambam and the fathers of Rav Yosef. In other words, the Rambam describes his initial meeting with Rav Yosef, and they're not family friends. Okay, in other words, he's saying, that apparently the Rambam did not. It's not a family friendship that went back. You see what I'm saying?
Okay. Because of the fact that what? It was
that in the letter, so we know that he wrote a letter to Yosef ben Yehudah in the Moreh,
right?
Because the whole book was written to him.
Right.
And in that letter, he describes their initial meeting, and he does not say, and I knew your family for a very long time. But in this letter that's ascribed to the Rambam, he says that our families have known each other for a very long time. In this letter,
with the Rabbi,
in this alleged letter,
also
to the Rambam,
what's his name?
to the same student,
Yeah,
right. And he also says Hishve compare
therefore,
therefore, like, okay, let's take a hypothetical scenario, okay, right?
Yeah.
Like, let's say I don't know. Let's say I wrote a letter to, let's say you have a letter that that I wrote to David Lechter, right? And I say in the letter, like, I've known your family for a very long time. Okay, right? And our families go way back. Okay, right? But then in this letter, right, in this other letter that's claimed to come from me, sorry, hold on a second. I just got it wrong. Scratch that. I have to use another example. Okay, let's say you, okay? Let's say I write a letter to you, okay? And we know that it's a letter to you, and I describe when you first came to yeshiva. Okay, right? Now let's say there's a letter that's claimed from me that I wrote to you. And in that letter, it says, your family and my family have been friends for a very long time. That's going to be sketchy, right? The letter that where we know I wrote it to you, where I describe us first meeting without any family friends history, that's like the certain one. And then the doubtful one is the one where I describe like this long family friendship.
Even though they don't have to necessarily contradict, because it's not saying when you and I met, just that you happen to also have known my family before I came to yeshiva, right?
Right, yeah.
Like, this doesn't feel like the line saying. It feels like it's talking about some more generic idea of forefathers.
Ha'ahava asher haisa beini lebenecha ubein abusecha hakadoshim. I mean, he's saying I knew your abusecha, your holy forefathers, right? I mean,
to me that sounds like he's saying we're talking about like Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and that's
he knows Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. That's even wilder. Yeah,
they're saying that our ahava is like their ahava.
I don't think so, because he's saying the ahava. I forgot what the word nimretzes means. Hold on. Translate nimretzes. Oops, nimratz. I think it means like strong, vigorous. Yeah. I don't know. I don't think he used the word vigorous love between. Yeah. Okay, fine. That's the one I'm least concerned about. Okay, and then apparently he says compare this to the way he introduces the Igeris Taman and in the Igeris to Shibun ibn Tibon. So apparently, like, he writes this up. Okay, now this is the interesting one. Od Kosev Hamachaber, the author of this alleged letter, also writes Mashi Gisa Lefane Mechachmas Hatchuna, that which you have learned before me, the science of mathematics. And the insights that I have guided you to in the matter of Kabbalah, Chachma Yuma Ayuma V'Nifla'a, a wondrous, terrible and wondrous Chachma. Okay, so he describes this. He uses the term Kabbalah. Okay.
In this case, he's using a different the way he uses it in Moreh, right?
Oh yeah, so that's going to be his point. And throughout the letter, he uses the term Chachmas HaKabbalah. Okay. Lozo bilvad Rambam eno mishtamish b'shum makom b'munach Kabbalah l'tzion chachmas sisrei Torah. Not only does the Rambam never in any place use the phrase Kabbalah when he's referring to the secrets of Torah, he always calls it sisrei HaTorah, secrets of Torah, or he refers to it by the subject of Masa Bereshis and Masa Merkava. Ella kimedume shagam hamukubalim b'nei tukufaso lo ishtamshu adayin b'munach chachmas Kabbalah. But the term chachmas HaKabbalah was not even used by people in that time period yet. So in other words, the calling it Kabbalah was not even a term that people used at that time period.
What do they call it?
Presumably called Sisrei Torah, secrets of Torah. Like that's how the Ramban calls it, V'rak b'tkuva me'ucheres yoser hucha hashimush b'munach zeh. Only at a later point does it use this phrase. Okay, and then the third one, Im haramam lamad im talmido b'yachad im limud chachmas hatchuna gam kabbalah masis. Okay, so in that previous quote, he says, "I learned with you math." Okay, that's chachmas hatchuna, and along with you that I learned with you kabbalah. So he says, if the Rambam learned with his student math along with kabbalah masis, with practical kabbalah, hari she'isuko ba kadam l'chibur hamoreh. So then the involvement in that practical Kabbalah would have had to come before the writing of the Moreh Nevuchim. Okay, so because if he was learning with the student math along with the practical Kabbalah, then that would have had to come, that learning together would have had to take place before the Moreh Nevuchim. Okay, why? So he says, why? Because in the beginning of the Moreh Nevuchim, he writes about their math learning experience.
Okay, so he's referring to something they already did.
Right.
This is the thing that they already did.
Right.
Apparently, the math came along with the Kabbalah.
With the Kabbalah, right. So he's saying, if Yefarnes, Efo mechaber ha'igeres es hisnagduso ha'ikronis hanimretas shel haraman l'shimush b'shemos. So how then does the author of this letter account for the Rambam's extreme opposition to the use of these names? The Moreh Nevuchim Chelik Aleph Perek Samach Aleph. So are you familiar with the Rambam Shita about like using names to work miracles?
No, but I've heard that in general that we shouldn't do that.
Right. So the Rambam goes further.
It's not like a thing, like some story about some guy. I don't know if they attribute to like Jesus or something or someone else maybe, but like if he wrote like a card like the name of Hashem in his hand, and that's how he was doing miracles. And that was a problem. It was
right. Yeah. So so I wrote about this in my blog post over the summer. That this is the one the Rambam's talking about the 42-letter name of God, and he says that. So he says the name having 42 letters is holy and sanctified. This is in 162 actually. We actually have to read in 161. The name having 42 letters is holy and sanctified and is only transmitted to one who is discreet, has reached the middle of his life and is not prone to anger or drunkenness, does not arouse criticism by his way of life, and speaks agreeably with people. And he who knows it is heedful thereof and observes it in purity, is beloved on high and popular below. He is feared by the people, his learning is preserved by him, and he inherits the two worlds, this world and the next. Okay, then he says, the Rambam goes on and he says like this, how very remote is the way that in which this Talmudic statement is usually understood from the true intention of the speaker. For most people think that it deals solely with the pronunciation of the letters, and it is not taken into consideration that these letters have a meaning, so that great things may be merited through them, and that for this reason there is needed the moral preparation and forming of many dispositions that were mentioned. In other words, the Rambam went through a bunch of like...
They teach something.
They teach something, the names teach something, and that's why you require a certain level of intellectual and moral perfection in order to have it.
I really like that he included the like speaking like with other people, because it's like not just the intellectual side of it and the concept.
There's a social perfection also.
Yeah.
When wicked and ignorant people found these texts, meaning the texts with these names of God, they had an ample basis for lying statements in that they would put together any letters they like and would say, this is a shame, this is a divine name that has efficacy and power to operate if it is written down or uttered in a particular way. Thereupon, these lies invented by the first wicked and ignorant men were written down, and these writings transmitted to decent, weak-minded, and foolish men who lacked the scales and means by which they could know the true from the false. These people accordingly made a secret of these writings, and the latter were found in the belongings left behind them, so they were thought to be true. To sum it up, a fool believes everything. So, and this is not the only place in the Moreh Nevuchim where the Rambam talks about this, but he talks about how these invented names, or people who just believe that divine names were treated this way in the Talmud because they have magical powers. And the Rambam writes that this is like just utter nonsense and foolishness, and he ascribes evil to the people who invented the names.
Is it saying that the people who think they have powers without the knowledge of the intention behind them?
No, he's saying that people who think that the names are like amulets in general.
Okay. Wasn't to say if you have full understanding of what the names meant, it would be different.
No, the Rambam does not hold that.
What do you mean?
The Rambam does not hold that you can work miracles if you have knowledge of the name. I'm gonna go get the part that's actually for
it. Right. And it's funny because it's like that's exactly why
I'm listening.
Most versions of Kabbalah that I've heard also have turned me off, because they also seem to be trying to appeal to like the human desire for like basically magic.
Right. Like cheat codes, yeah.
Yeah, and then the ones that have appealed to me like are entirely
knowledge.
They're just like essentially a methodology to how to perfect yourself and how to correct your desires.
Correct, right. Look at page 149. This is in the Moreh Nevuchim 161. So he says
so 169?
Yeah, 169. Or sorry, 149. So it's on the paragraph, do not think. Mm-hmm. Do not think anything other than this, and do not let occur to your mind the vain imaginings of the writers of charms, or what names you may hear from them or may find in their stupid books, names that they have invented, which are not indicative of any notion whatsoever, but which they call the names and of which they think that they necessitate holiness and purity and work miracles. All these are stories that it is not seemly for a perfect man to listen to, much less to believe. And then he goes on and talks about the articulated name. Then in the next chapter is the one that I was reading from. Let me just see if he says something. There's another thing where he says that there's another place where he says, I can't find it. He says that people think that these things are true if they find them in a book, and all the more so if it's a very old book, which I thought was like ironic because that's how the Megilat was like referred to, where he found the Rambam's thing. So in other words, he's saying like if the Rambam learned math with this guy and at the time before the writing of the Moreh Nevuchim and wrote the Moreh Nevuchim for the same guy, the same Talmud, what do we do with the vigorous opposition to this belief in the magical use of names? Similarly, in Mezuzah, he quotes Hilchos Mezuzah 5:4. I mean, this is a famous one. Mezuzah 5:4, where the Rambam talks about the writing of names in mezuzahs. Ahava, Tefillin Mezuzah Sefer Torah 5:7. No, 5.
But the fake names or even the right?
So these even the real names. So he says minhag pashut. It is a widespread minhag. Shekosvin al hamezuzah mibachutz keneged harevach shebein parsha leparsha shin daled yod. To write on the parchment between the parshios of the Shema and the Haya, the name shin daled yod. So on the outside, the Aimbas have said there's no harm in this because it's on the outside. About Elu shekosvin ba mibifnim shemos malachim o shemos kadoshim o pasuk o chosamos. But those people who write inside names of angels or holy names or a pasuk or charms, they're included in people who don't have a portion in the world to come. These fools, lo dai lahem shebitlu hamitzvah. Not only did they negate the mitzvah, meaning because they're messing up the inside of the mezuzah, ela she'osin mitzvah gedola shehi yichud shmosh al kadosh baruch hu va'avaso va'avodaso. They're taking a great mitzvah which pertains to the oneness of God and his love and his service, as if it's a charm for their own, an amulet for their own benefit. As if this foolish thing will help them in the world, So
what paragraph was that?
That was 5:4 in Mezuzah. And then he said,
why is it okay to write it on the outside? Feels like that's
because that apparently doesn't puzzle the Mezuzah, because it's not in the part that has to be written with just the parshios.
Oh, I mean, I guess that makes sense. But I thought his issue was besides that, it was also that it's like an issue, I guess, belief-wise, like that.
No, right? He's in favor of writing shin daled yod on the outside.
Yeah, no, but I'm saying the reason he doesn't like it
in
the inside is not just because it's making a puzzle, right?
Right.
It's also because it's like a false. So shouldn't that still, even if it doesn't make a puzzle, so still be a problem?
So it seems like if the person were to write shin daled yod on the outside, believing that it had some power like this, then he would have a problem with it. But that's not why what the minhag was about.
Okay, so the minhag was about making it in the inside.
Yeah, so there's actually Rebbe, the Baal HaKuntris gave that's a nickname for someone. He wrote a one-page shiur on this. On that minhag, which I think I said last year that I would go over it, but we didn't do it yet. So maybe we could do it sometime this year. There's an idea there though behind it about why shin daled yod is on the outside and why it's between the two parshios.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then second, is this kind of at all saying anything about things like that are like I don't know, like with the hand of Fatima? Is there anything else that you could say, like things like that?
Right. I guess it seems like the Rambam would hold. Well, okay, it's funny if you put like like the chamsa thing. You mean so if the person put a chamsa on it, it's funny. The Rambam would hold that is bad because you're making it into a charm. Like if that's what you believe, you're making it into a charm. Also, it might be a problem because my understanding is the chamsa did come from Avodah Zarah, from the Arabs, right? But he would not say that it's worse. He would say it's worse to write. Oh no! Sorry, what am I saying? Yeah, he would say it's just as bad, right? Because you're still taking this mezuzah with about Yichud Hashem and Avos Hashem and Avodas Hashem, and you're making it into an amulet. Yeah. I guess that wasn't yet popular in his time.
Like hamsas.
Oh yeah. Okay, then Rav Sheilat goes on and he says, "Ha'uvda sha'machaber maskir b'geras es sefer asher chibartiv l'cha b'karasiv Moreh hanavuchim ena tzricha." So the fact that the author of this Megilat Setarim mentions in the letter, he says, the book that I composed for you, which is called Moreh Nevuchim, ena tzricha, is not necessary. K'muvan lahaftia, hein zehu hasimaman hamuvhak lietziras roshem shel autentius v'hazaifan me'unin b'kankan v'lo b'mesh yeshbo. Okay, hold on. This is modern Hebrew. I'm not good with modern Hebrew words here. So apparently in the letter, the author of this letter wrote like references by name the Moreh Nevuchim and says that like the book the Moreh Nevuchim that I wrote for you. Okay, so he's saying that is not necessary as understood. Lahaftia. Okay, I got to look at Google Translate for lahaftia. That's a modern Hebrew word. Lahaftia, surprise. Lahaftia, to surprise. Hein zehu hasimaman hamuvhak. Oh, okay. There he says, this itself is the sign, the essential sign, lietziras roshem, to create an impression of authenticity. V'hazaifan, and the forger, me'unin v'kankan. What is me'unin? Me'unin? Yeah, and this could mean is interested, or like ma'anyen, is interested,
or like Indian,
b'kankan, in the vessel of v'lo b'mash yeshbo, and not on the inside. I think what he's saying is like this. He's saying the guy who forged this letter from the Rambam to Yosef ben Yehudah is trying to like bolster the authenticity of the letter by saying, yeah, I wrote the Moreh Nevuchim to you, without even realizing that in the Moreh Nevuchim there is so much opposition to the use of divine names to work miracles, which is what the letter contains, expressions of how to do.
Does the Rambam call it the Moreh Nevuchim?
I thought so.
Okay, fine. Never mind.
I think in the Hakdama he says that.
Okay,
yeah.
fine. Never mind.
Yeah. And then he says, "B'ofen klali yesh lomer she'agados misof b'sof yamav Rambam chazar bo." Oh, actually, sorry. Let me read from. I found this in the encyclopedia.com. What was it?
That'd be embarrassing.
Yeah, right.
That.
Right. Encyclopedia.com entry on Kabbalah. Then it's talking about like just the history of how Kabbalah was received. So it says, an attempt to weight the balance in favor of Kabbalah found expression in the criticism of the work of Judah bin Ibn Malka, attributed to Isaac of Acre. That's a famous Kabbalist, I think, who also followed Ibn Wakar in his commentary to Sefer Yetzirah called Meshovev Netivot, and his commentary to the Torah, okay, blah, blah, blah. But the Zohar had a very strong influence on him. In the discussions of the philosophical Kabbalists, a great deal of attention was paid to the question of the relationship between the theosophic theory of the Sefirot. I always forget what theosophy is. I think it's working magic with divine names. Does that ring a bell? Oh, teaching about God and the world based on mystical insights. That's just like another fancy word for mysticism, I guess. The theosophic theory of the Sefirot, as opposed to the astronomical theory of the Sefirot. Kasadigon, in his commentary in Sefer Yetzirah, writes about the Sefirot, but he writes about them as like, not astrology, astronomy. He writes about them astronomically. Oh, I did. Okay, good. Between the theosophic theory of the Sefirot, the philosopher's theory of separate intelligences, and the Neoplatonic idea of the cosmic soul. Attempts were made to explain the guide of the perplexed in the Kabbalistic manner. That's what I was referring to before. People who like try to unify the two theories, or at least to clarify certain problems in it from the standpoint of the Kabbalah, using methods different from that of Abraham Abulafia. In the critique, for example, in the critique attributed to Joseph Gikatilla, or in the Tisha Prakim Yichud attributed to Maimonides. Following Abulafia, the urge to make a Kabbalist of Maimonides was emphasized in the legend that he had a change of heart at the end of his life and turned to the Kabbalah, a tale that was current from the year 1300 and appears in several versions. In the period, the Megilat Setarim was also written, which is said to be a letter of Maimonides concurring the Kabbalah. So that's what Rav Sheilat is referring to. He says, in general, Yishlomer, we can say Agados Misug B'Sof Yamav Chazar Haramam Chazar Bo, that the legends in the category of at the end of his days the Rambam retracted. Inan Mosifos Kavod Lola Ramav Lola Kabbalah. They don't add glory to the Rambam. They don't add glory to the Kabbalah. Haderach Hanachona Bashvos Mishnaso Hayunis Shal Ramam L'Chachmas Kabbalah Hi Biyarida L'Omik Hamusagim Halokim Shal Shtein. Says the proper path to like equate or make parallel the teachings, the in-depth teachings of the Rambam and the Chachmas of Kabbalah. Meaning, if you're going to take this approach of to try to like find a parallel, then how do you do it? is through Yerida la'omeg hamusagim lehelokim shel shtein. You go into the deep metaphysical concepts in both of them. Uvegilui hazaha hamashutav lahen, and in the bringing to light the like a little overlap between them. As many chachamim who have done throughout the generations. In fact, I think I heard this from Rabbi Moskowitz, that Rabbi Moskowitz's son Shmuley, Alav Shalom, who was described as I've heard Shmuley, you'll hear people talk about Shmuley Moskowitz, that people will say like there are only two geniuses who I've ever known, Rabbi Chait and Shmuley Moskowitz, so apparently he held that the Rambam's metaphysics was just the same ideas as certain areas of Kabbalah, but just like in different language. And not by forcing an artificial like identity from one over the other. So he's saying like he's basically like giving his input, saying like don't like fake it. These guys if you think that there's a common identity, like learn it in depth.
You can't you don't try to learn one and lie to the other first.
Right.
Learn them separately and then explain them on their own terms.
Right.
And then show how they're similar.
Yeah. So that was just the little thing that I found there. I had another argument. To me, the strongest argument, stronger than all of the opposition of the Rambam. I mean, I think he could have gone a lot more with the. If this letter is claimed to have been written after the Moreh Nevuchim, which is itself was written after the Mishnah Torah, then hold on just a second here. In other words, okay, fine, maybe not the Mishnah Torah. The letter would have to recant the anti-magic and superstition stuff that was in the Moreh, or at least explain the difference between them. But I was going to say the real proof is like this. So who is the one who quotes the Rambam the most in terms of having direct instruction from the Rambam in matters even up to the end of his life is Avram ben Rambam. Avram ben Rambam's entire Torah commentary, his commentary on Bereshis and Shemos, is filled with saying, my father told me this, my father told me that. It'd be very weird if the Rambam at the end of his life retracted and became a Kabbalist, and those teachings were and didn't tell his son about it. And his son carries on with the approaches in the Moreh Nevuchim and being against these things. Yeah, exactly right. He concealed it from his son. So the just the end. You have a question or a comment?
Yeah. So just to clarify on this.
Yeah.
Because this is to say that this is not a proof to show that the Rambam was a Kabbalist, at least according to the terms of this letter, but also by the definition of Kabbalah by this letter, which includes using the names of Hashem or these fake names of Hashem for magic. So this is really kind of what it's limited to, is that we're only saying that this is not proof that this form of Kabbalah. Right,
correct. Yeah. The whatever practical Kabbalah, and really what you should do is I read through the letter that I showed you is very long, but if there is an English version available, and I tried to look for one, read through it, and it really does have this miracle working type thing. Yeah. I don't know what else it does have.
Already to me, that's enough.
Yeah, but I was going to say one more thing also. So one other thing also, just another reason I brought this up is because unfortunately there is a history of forging works throughout Jewish history, and the most astounding one, which I haven't read about when I was looking into this. So someone forged actually, let me see if I can find it here. Jerusalem Kodshin forgery. So I think this is a legendary one. Yeah. So there was a forged Talmud Yerushalmi in recent years on, they forged an entire order of Talmud Yerushalmi, and with a document that was artificially aged, apparently. And I haven't looked into this, but unfortunately there is a history of people forging halachic stuff, forging hashkafic stuff. And the funny thing also is I was thinking about this. This is with this particular Kabbalistic letter thing. This is the type of thing that is a conspiracy theory, where it's not falsifiable. On the Rambam's deathbed, he said I recant all of my my teaching. So it's you have to treat this in the same way that you treat any other conspiracy theory, with that same like dose of skepticism. The thing that I'm curious about that he doesn't write about, which is usually the way that we authenticate these things, is the handwriting. We know the Rambam's handwriting, and I don't know if it's because it's possible. What was that?
Use magazine letters.
Yeah, right. My guess is that it's possible that there is no actual copy of like the original copy of the letter. It seems like it was just like, published already. And that's why we can't look at the handwriting.
What the lawyer's talking about, is that one in Hebrew or in Arabic?
So that's what I'm not sure about. I mean, it sounds.
Because if the lawyer's talking about it, there's one that
I mean, I would assume it's in Arabic because he wrote to R Yosef ben Yehudah, but I'm not sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think because it was in terms like Kabbalah meaning Arabic.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. Well, if it was the language that the Rambam wrote in, I mean, the Rambam clearly preferred Arabic, except for the Mishnah Torah where he writes the reasons why he wrote that one in Hebrew.
I just realized it makes no sense why there's so many Arabs with the name Yosef. Doesn't make sense. Why would that seem weird? Because they deviate after you.
Oh, that is interesting. Yeah.
It's the same stock of names.
Interesting.
I'm not.
Okay, I actually have to go now because it's Tuesday. But tomorrow I want to do a little thing before we start whatever Megillah stuff we're going to do. I want to because I think we should do Megillah stuff now because we only have like limited number of times before Purim. There's a little thing that I found when I was looking through this. On the it's a 2-paragraph Rambam tshuva on saying brachos or davening fast and why you shouldn't do it. And since in our self-experiment group, then Oren is trying an experiment to think before he says a bracha, then I thought it would be a good way to show what the Rambam says on that. All right, let's stop.
Can you send me the one that we mentioned earlier?
Yeah,
that actually